Del Potro didn't have the heaviest topspin forehand, he didn't have the fastest racket head speed, but somehow his forehand was one of the most feared weapons on the ATP Tour, taking the likes out of Roger Federer at the US Open final in 2009 where he won his first Grand Slam. In this video, we're going to break down exactly how the legend Del Potro hit his forehand, having a look at the delayed acceleration to the way he generated effortless power through timing and leverage. So let's get into the video. So Del Potro used a semi-western grip for his forehand, but he had a much flatter extension through the end of his shot, allowing him to play a really penetrating lower trajectory shot over the net. But because of this grip, he also had good access to hitting topspin and shaping the ball over the net. But when he wanted to, that grip almost slightly more around towards an eastern grip on the forehand side really allowed him to generate that heavy ball speed. So on the racket preparation for the forehand, just notice how he keeps this left hand on the side of the racket, and he's also coiled his shoulders, so his shoulders are now side on towards us, right? As he takes the racket back, the strings are facing down with the left hand of the racket on the throat of the racket. And then he's going to get into his set position. So as the ball comes in to land on his side of the court, that's when he's going to start to prepare the racket up. And if I draw a line through his shoulders, you'll see that the head of the racket goes above his head height. All right, so that's a really key on his That's a real key on his preparation. So as the ball's coming in, he extends that left arm out to the side, and that's really helping him with his spacing out to contact, which is really important. And then you'll see also that he has a high elbow on the take back, right? So he's got plenty of space between his elbow and his waist. It's not too tucked in close to his body, and you'll also see that the strings are facing the side there. So he's got the hand almost waving to the side, you could picture, right? And that left arm's really extended out for the spacing. So now let's have a look at the racket drop. You'll see that his hand is also higher than the elbow, okay? And that's just going to allow him to generate a lot of momentum into the racket drop phase. So as the ball starts to come in, he's loading on his back leg, right? So he's going to play on a closed stance for this shot, or an inline stance. And just notice how he's loading that weight through the back leg, and as he loads that back leg, that's when he goes into the racket drop phase. And one thing's quite interesting about him, because he's 6'6", it's quite interesting how he drops his left arm down to where the ball is. So if the ball's low, he actually dropped the arm down to where the ball is. And I found that quite interesting, because not all the players have to do that, but that's because of his height. So you can see, here's what makes Del Potro's forehand quite different, is that long take back, right? So he really extends this arm quite far back behind him, with the tip of the racket actually facing the back wall. And if you look at Stefanos Tsitsipas's forehand when he first came on the tour, it actually resembled this a little bit. So now what that's going to do is really allow his kinetic energy that he stored through his body, for his lower body, his core and his hip, to rotate, right? And this is where the power of leverage really comes into play. And because he's got a big frame, he's got a really long arm span, you can see that the arm and the elbow start to straighten out in this position, right? So his racket is a long way from his body. And we all know that leverage is created when the distance that racket's traveling from his body is furthest away from him is going to create the most leverage, all right? And all that energy from the leverage that he's stored is going to transfer into the ball. So let's just wind it on. You can see that the butt cap of the racket is now pointing at the ball, and he's got a nice leg bend on that front leg. So he's loading forward on that front leg, And now this is where the swing path is going to take place. And this is when he's nice and loose in that arm. Just look how he's extending forward through the contact. And just notice as he does this, how much the strings start to face down. So by letting the strings face down, it's going to ensure that because of his grip, his racket face is not going to open on contact. Whereas if your racket face, if the strings are not as faced to the ground, then the strings can open up on contact, and that's when you see a lot of club players hit the ball to the ceiling. So this position is a real key with a lot of the top players. You'll see that they get this almost like a right angle between their forearm and their wrist position. It's almost like this, right? You'll see this with Rafa, with Roger, and they create that angle here, and that's just showing you the racket lag, how much that racket is actually lagging back, and then that's how the whip effect is created, right? And by letting this angle happen, you're maximizing that racket lag, that whip effect into contact, right? So if you're trying to improve your forehand, have a look in the mirror, or have a look on the camera and see what is that angle like before the racket makes contact with the ball, because that will give you a lot of information if you've got what it takes to have an ATP Pro level forehand. So let's have a look at the contact point. So he's extending out. Just look how far in front of his body he extends, right? And that's the key. That's how Del Potro was so punishing on his forehand, was because all that leverage and how far he hits the ball out in front of his body is what just allowed him to take time away from his opponent and just make that forehand an absolute bullet, because it's like throwing a punch in a boxing match. If you extend and you punch right out in front, you're going to maximize your leverage, whereas if you're close in a jab, it's probably not going to be a knockout blow, whereas he's got all that power coming through, extending through the ball, right? So if I draw like an arrow this way, you can just see the extension through the contact with that arm fully straight. And Roger Federer hits that arm with a straight arm forehand, and Rafa, a lot of the best players in the world have that straight arm forehand, and like today, Alcaraz is almost in this position also. So in that position, you can see how the arm has extended, and there's again, the hand is actually bent a little bit back, right? So it's almost like the hand is facing back. The back of the hand is facing the back wall right on the contact, and that's the strongest position you can be in when you're hitting your straight arm forehand, right? So the tip of the racket is pointing right at us, and you can just see that ball leaving the racket and the extension that he's still looking to get through the contact, right? And that's what you really got to try and do to maximize the leverage through the shot. And just look at how much this arm is extending, right? And that is the secret sauce to the Del Potro knockout forehand. Let's have a look at the follow through, nice and high to the shoulder. And he comes through with that classic nice bend on the finish, and the racket goes round the shoulder there, right? Finishes just below the shoulder, right? So if I draw a line there, you can see that that racket is finished just below his shoulder, and you'll see that the strings are facing down on the follow through, and that's what I said at the beginning when I said he's got the semi-western grip, but he's able to really flatten out through the extension because of through the contact point, because he'll finish with the strings facing down. Whereas if the strings faced open more around the shoulder, that would be lifting the ball. So hope you guys really enjoyed this video on Del Potro. He's got one of the best forehands the game has ever seen. Give me a like and subscribe if you're into this sort of content, and if you want your own game analysed, just hit the link in my bio and I'll work with you. There's a free taster that you can sign up for, and I'll send you some free feedback. So thanks again. See you on the next video. Jack.